Hi, this is Melanie, the artist behind Browneyes FineArt, and this video is a work in progress of Henry. Henry, as you can see, is an adorable basset hound. So the drawing is basically done at this point, and so this work in progress is completing Henry's back. Henry is a very vibrant, dark black dog with a mixture of browns and whites. And so when doing black, so that the black doesn't look flat, as just black alone can make the picture look flat, I use a lot of dark blues and purples. As you can see in one section of the back, there's just a base layer down, and it is purple. And currently I'm using a dark blue pencil to put in some underlayers. At this point I'm still using a very light hand, putting down these layers of fur, making sure that I'm going in the direction of the fur as I put down my marks. Henry is a short-haired dog, which makes doing the layers a little bit more easier. I don't have to do so many layers to get the fur texture for a short-haired dog. And so this is basically color mapping the darker areas, and then I'm going back over some of the other layers just to make sure that the color matches as I move forward into other areas of the dog's back. Now I'm doing toward the underneath belly of Henry. It is a little darker under there, of course, because the light source is toward the top of his back. But we do see some lighter areas where there are some rolls. And so you'll see as I lay down more layers and use different colors that it brings depth into the drawing. So here I'm adding some highlights to the end of some darker fur. This brings in more depth, as mentioned before, and adds a little sheen to the coat. Henry has a little bit of white from the underneath of his belly showing toward the very bottom. So right now I'm adding in kind of like an off-white color, and then I'm adding for the highlights of where the light's hitting a little bit more is the light blue. Throughout the drawing where there are white areas of Henry, that particular light blue color is used, and it makes it look more bright than actually the white itself. So at this point I'm adding back in the little stray black hairs that roll into the white hair. That tool that you see there is a blending tool. It has a very soft rubber tip to it, and when I use it I ensure that I am also using it into the direction that the fur is going. It not only blends the different layers together, it also can remove the hue or the pigment as well. That's why I ensure that I go into the direction of the fur. So if it does remove a little hue, it does actually look like hair. adding some finishing touches to the already completed layers of Henry's back, just to make sure again that I do have the same coloring in each portion of the dog. Now I'm laying a second base coat on the area that has no detail yet, just has the first base coat on it of purple, and what I'm using now is black. This particular pencil is a lot more chalky and it has a more blunt of a tip to it so that I can add more colorant down faster. Now this here is called a stump. It's made out of paper and I use it to blend the layers into the paper to make sure the pigment is sticking to the texture of the paper. Here I am adding in some of the fine details of some of the layers with a blue color again, which I will use as a foundation color along with the purple as mentioned before for black fur. So I'm doing a color mapping of darker areas on the back, and then I'm blending it in again with the stump. Going back over and doing some more fine details. Sometimes when you're working with pastels, other areas can get a little dull, so as you saw there a little bit on his head, I went back over an area just to add a little bit of depth to it. As you can see, I touch all over the paper where outside of the boundaries of the dog, and that's why I don't do backgrounds until I'm done with the picture. A lot of people like to tape the paper down to the drawing board, where I like to be able to move the drawing around as I do certain areas. So therefore, as I mentioned, I do the backgrounds last so that I'm not sticking my fingers all in it. So here I'm adding some detailed layers with the darker pencil, just making sure that the depth shows from the different layers of the dog's back fur. So this is a lighter gray pencil, which I help to add a little more detail to the fur as far as the highlights within the black fur itself. As you can see, it shows a little bit more detail as far as showing the direction of the fur and the texture of the fur. So I finished up the dog, and so now I'm starting to work on the background. And so before I do that, I erase any fingerprints that might have accidentally got added to the picture, you know, especially when you're working with dark colors. And that brush is how I brush away the little pieces of the eraser that are stuck to the textured paper. Now the drawing is ready to start applying the background. I use a very soft hand pastel and a sponge, and basically apply the color using little circle motions with my hand. I'll start with a, I guess the medium color first, and then from there I'll go to the darker color. In this case, I'm using neutral grays. And at first I pick areas, not random, but actually there is a design in my mind. And I do little circular motions, as I mentioned before, and I start with basically a circle on the paper, and then I will gradually branch out from that main circle where most of the pigment is, and then blend in that color around it. Now that I've finished with that color, I'm adding a lighter color now, and I'll add it in the areas where I haven't added in the darker color, filling in the empty spots. And this gets added around the drawing and all of the different empty spots, and I'll blend it in, and I'm casually blending it in right now because I will go back over this with a different type of sponge, spending time blending in the colors and making sure that it all looks very smooth. You can see at this picture that there is like an aura around the dog right now, because I'm staying away from it so I don't smudge it. And so what you see now is a tool that I use to actually push the hue of the background colors into the dog. So I'm starting with the darker color now, where I'm pushing it into the dog's leg at this point, and being very careful around this area. But by doing this, I'm taking away that little aura around the dog, so it does look like the dog belongs in the background and it wasn't just placed into something and floating in space. Again, I'm very carefully going around the legs of the dog and the toes. And you can see that you can see some of the marks that look a little darker around the boundaries of the dog as well, and that will all be blended away in the final touches of working with the background. Here I'm adding the lighter color now and pushing that into the dog. Doing some finishing touches with this specialized tool. We will be coming to the end of this video shortly. And I just want to remind people that entire WIP photos can be seen on my Facebook page. I also have all the videos on my website. It's Browneyes FineArt.com. Please do visit it often, as I do update it as I do my commission drawings. And as always, at the end of this video, you will see the finished photo, or excuse me, the finished drawing and the reference photo. I really appreciate you joining me and watching this work in progress of Henry. So until next time, this is Melanie with Browneyes Fine Art. Live, laugh, and create.